All right, we'll get started here. Thanks everybody for joining. My name is Max Hahn. I am the marketing director here at Baicells Technologies. Today we're joined by the Google SAS team, who is going to be going over their SAS platform, just kind of give an overview of that. And so that is Martin Jensen, who's going to be presenting here today. Thank you, Martin, for taking the time to join us. We are also joined today by Jared Van Dyne of Total High Speed Internet, who is going to be talking about his experience using the Google SAS platform. And that'll be towards the end of our presentation here today. I'm going to give a quick overview of who Baicells is. I'm sure many of you know, but just to give you a quick overview, and then we'll get started with Google. So we're an international company providing disruptively priced and technically innovative 4G, LTE, and 5G NR access solutions. We serve over 50 countries across the globe, and really our goal here is to connect the unconnected. We've got over 300 patents currently since our inception in 2014. And right now, we do currently boast over 700 private LTE networks across the globe again. A lot of those networks are actually in here in North America. So we're privately funded and operated, and Baicells takes security incredibly seriously. All the data transfer done using Baicells equipment is private, and Baicells Cloud Core services are housed on Microsoft Azure services here in the United States. So no data transfer is ever gone beyond those locations. We really do pledge to uphold the rights of all the individuals and the privacy that accompanies it. And so as a privately held business with large investors such as Qualcomm, we really focus on our customers' needs first. So we want to assure you that all users of Baicells equipment, privacy is always a top concern when it comes to us. So we're working alongside a lot of our ecosystem partners, many of those that are listed here. So we're really setting the pace for 5G and future technologies with wireless solutions. All these solutions can serve rural outdoor, urban outdoor, commercial indoor, unlicensed LTE, and just a wide variety of vertical opportunities. So we're combining open cloud, mobile edge computing, and affordable radio access networks, and we're really striving to revamp the economics of information and communications technology industry in the next coming years. So really what we're looking to do here at Baicells is deliver connections that are ubiquitous. We're looking to connect all parts of the world. And in order to do this, we need to make sure that these solutions are affordable. And so we really do price our products to be price disruptive. And we're also thinking forward in the future. So we want our products to be green. And by that, I mean, we want to use less power. So that way we've got lower carbon emissions and just a healthier environment overall. So why do you want to use Baicells? Well, really, these applications here is where Baicells can be used. Overall, Baicells is LTE standardized, so that means it is compliant with the 3GPP standards, which means you can use LTE products with other 3GPP standardized LTE products. And we're also looking forward to the future. So we've got O-RAN solutions, and we've developed a path towards 5G. So stay tuned for that. We're going to be having some webinars based on the 5G solutions that we do have. Finally, I would just like to say that we are going to be discussing Google SAS here today. We do have some other compatible SAS partners, just for you to be aware that we are working within the larger wireless ecosystem here today. So that's everything for me. Martin, thanks for joining us here today. I'm going to hand this off to you, and you'll be free to share your slides.
Awesome. Thank you, Max, and thank you to the Baicells team for having us here. It's an honor. We're going to share some slides here today with you. Yeah, so thank you. So what we want to present here today is some of the experiences that we'd had over the past couple of months about transitioning the networks from CBRS, or from Part 92 to Part 96 CBRS. One of the things that one of the feedback we get from WISP and working with them when they go through this, they call it a journey, a CBRS journey. It ultimately ends up with more spectrum at the end, 50 versus 150, but it also includes a process and a journey on learning how to share the spectrum with your neighbors, basically, and also learn to share them with the incumbents as well. Also part of the journey is getting familiar with the spectrum access system, as a whole and how to use that and use it to your benefit as you start to venture into using some of that incremental spectrum. And whether you're just starting to go through this migration, this session is sort of aimed at sharing some of that first-hand learnings and experiences from migration that we already participated in, as well as also answering some of these common questions that I've been coming in through the Google support line as well. We can't cover everything in this session and this short seminar, but we're hoping that the audience takeaway from this is going away with some very practical information that you can use as part of this venture and journey of migrating into Part 96 or CBRS. So one of the first things we have in mind, one of the first things that's coming up is the 17th of October deadline for migrating all of your Part 90 grandfathered license. So this is sort of the aim of this. And what we have seen from doing this so far is that if you divide it up into 4 distinct phases, it makes the transition a little bit easier. And that's what we are proposing. The first step is the planning aspect. Planning is super important. This is where you collect all the information on your installed base, on your network that is needed for the CBSD to operate in the 150 megahertz of spectrum. A relatively large phase, and we're going to go into some of the experiences that we have as part of that. But if you bring it up into the planning phase, followed by the setup and preparation phase, is where you all these things you found out from the planning phase, you sort of start to implement them ahead of doing any migration. There might be some changes that needs to be done. There might be some updates that needs to be done, but this is sort of the setup and preparation phase for the migration. The next common method is to test and communicate the migration process, if you will, on a selected area, so that you're not going and doing the entire migration in one big swoop. And the last, of course, is the execute and verify. And we're going to go through each of these phases in the subsequent slide. And if you can talk about the 5th phase, which is where Google wants to help you with some spectrum reports that we can generate from the SAS perspective, and some of these new things that you can see in the portal as well, with channel coordination and interference groups that will go over, that can basically generate some spectrum reports for figuring out how to better utilize the expanded spectrum. So we're going to go into that in some of the subsequent slides. I want to emphasize the importance of the planning phase. This is really the biggest effort, to be quite frank with you, when we've seen from the past, and good input yields a good output at the end. So do not underestimate the amount of work that's associated with the planning phase, as it is super, super important. And it does take a good amount of time. And if you're prepared well up front, then it gets you a very good outcome at the end. So the planning phase consists of 5 distinct phases, of which some you might have performed already. But obviously the first one is make sure that you're signed up with the SAS. The SAS gives you access to some of the tools that Google provides that I will be demonstrating as part of this session. The next phase is the gathering of your network equipment in your network. This is the task that takes a long time. Make sure you have all the installed parameters captured, because that is what you will need for importing the information into the SAS to be able to activate CBRS. What we have also found is that one of the tools that's being utilized by a lot of WISP is the network planner tool that we offer. So all of the data that you collect from their network information retrieval, map that out in the network to see how it looks like. It may sound a little silly, but it actually yields out to be extremely useful, because if you find an issue or find a problem with your data up front, that can save you a lot of time on later on. I'll go into a demonstration of how that typically looks like, and how we can help, and how you can utilize that functionality. Then obviously you need a CPI certified engineer on your team that can verify and validate all of the data that you're inserting into the SAS portal. And then also the option of checking up your Part 90 license statuses. Are your CBSDs, are they registered in the FCC database, and do they already block up the upper part of the CBRS spectrum, the 50 megahertz? So there's you need to check that, and if that's the case, relinquish those. And we have some links in here that can help you with identifying where you might have that issue and how to relinquish those frequencies. Here is some links for you. There's the Google Sign Up SAS on the left-hand side. The middle slide is where you can check your Part 90 license status on the FCC website to see if it's active or if it's not active. And if it is active, you can cancel it through the link on the right-hand side. It is our experience that the relinquishment of an existing license from the time it's requested to be relinquished until all the SASs adopt this change, until FCC approves, and until all the SASs implement this change, at that time is about 2 weeks' time. It could be a little less, it could be a little bit more, but 2 weeks is probably a good estimation based on our experiences so far. And obviously you can cancel a single license, single sector, or the entire, or alternatively all of your sites. So I mentioned earlier that a good practice is to map out your data as you collect it, as well as mapping it once you're done with the entire retrieval of all that information, ensuring that your data is correct prior to importing. I also know that there's a lot of other usage of Network Planner, but for this specific purpose, just looking at it as a checklist is a very good way of doing this. And it also gives you a baseline of how the network will look like. And I'll show you a little demonstration of a demonstration network that we created to show you how you can utilize this tool and how you typically find some areas and what to search for. So I'm going to go out of slide mode and just switch over to an input sheet that we have created. And we can share this input sheet with you. It basically collects all of the information from your network, insert all the information on your network in terms of what is required from the network planner perspective, but also from the SAS perspective. So collect your information into this tab that says radio network details, and collect all the information from your base station sectors, from your CPEs, including the antenna gain, antenna height, all the important pertinent information that's required from a SAS perspective. This sheet will feed two other sheets. One is the network planner input that you can basically create a comma-separated file from and import it directly into Network Planner. Once that's verified, the third tab here is the SAS input. You can do a comma-separated file as well. We only have some demonstration sites in here, but this will feed this sheet, and you can create a comma-separated file from it and feed it directly into Network Planner, into the SAS, and that will create those CBSD for you. So to demonstrate this, I will go into Network Planner input. I will click File. I can click Download and a comma-separated file. That will create my comma-separated file. In the corner here, I will drag that over to the side. In the back end here, I have the Network Planner tool. And what I can do, I can simply take the file I just created. It was in here, Network Planner file, and then download comma-separated file. And I can simply, so this demonstration network here is approximately 1,000 sites, including CBSDs. So I will drop it into Network Planner to see how my network looks like. And in this case, I will update the file and insert it into Network Planner. And a couple of things that you can do to quickly see how is my installed data that I collected from the network, probably from the network portal or other sources. But you can clearly see there's an issue with this particular CP that's located somewhere here in Asia, where it doesn't belong. You can simply click it and see what is wrong with it. This one particular has a problem with its, remove the screen, has a problem with its coordinates. So it's probably just missing a minus, and that will place it back to where it belongs. Of course, it's super important that you have all your install base information accurately for importing it into the SAS. The other things that we know our customers are looking for is your azimuth correct? So for example, on this one, I can zoom into a certain area, and you can see there's obviously this CPE does not have its azimuth in its correct location. So I can click it, and I can quickly find out what the area is. This is just distorted with 180 degrees, so I'll just update that to where it belongs. And that way you can quickly get an overview and see how your network looks like, and see where there's potential changes that you need to make in your install base parameters. Obviously, a lot of our customers also use this as a propagation tool and model to see where your site propagates and so on and so forth, including also creating polygons to ensure that your plant coverage areas are covered sufficiently. Well, that's one way the network planner can be used just as part of a validation process as part of this initial stage before you actually do any migrations. The same approach is being used. The same approach can be used towards the SAS server. Do the same thing. Download a comma separated file from the other tab, and then drag and drop it into the SAS portal, and that will create all of the inputs into the SAS portal. The other, as I mentioned before, you want to check what your spectrum availability is, and if your Part 90 license might still be active. And you can see that here through the spectrum availability in Network Planner, which is also visible in the SAS portal as well. So back to the presentation. And I mentioned planning the spectrum as well. This is where Google also can help with some of the new features that we have implemented, more specifically called Coexistence. And there's a couple of things, and we go into that into other seminars. We do have, every Tuesday, we do have onboarding session for the SAS and Network Planner that you can see. And we also have recordings from the past where we go into this in a lot more detail than I'm doing in this short seminar. But with planning your spectrum is you obviously you check your SAS portal overlays, you check the top 50, if it's blocked or if it's free. And then there might also be other incumbents in the area. So you can see the impact of those in the SAS portal and in the Network Planner. And that typically looks like this. So it's not just the output power that you can see and in the Google tools, but you can also see the calculated channel quality. So upfront, before you even start to do your migration, you can see, if you can see the left tab over here, the coex functionality. Basically, every night we create and we do a propagation modeling of entire networks, and not just to determine what is the output power you can get per CPSD, but also what is the channel quality, so that when you start figuring out what your spectrum migration would look like, you can get a preview of what the channel quality look like, and then determine the better channel for your CPSDs. The next one is to define your coordination groups. Coordination groups is something that is new. It's basically two main parameters. The first parameter is the CCG. The CCG is basically it's a linkage between your base station sector and your CPEs. So the SAS knows that this particular CPE needs to connect to that particular base station sector, and that goes into the algorithms for the Google tools to help you determine what the optimal spectrum plan is for the broader 150 megahertz of spectrum. There's also another parameter called ICG, which is the interference channel group that basically determines sectors and CPSDs that do not interfere with each other. So those are two new parameters that, if they're imported into the SAS portal, we can create a frequency planning report for you to review that looks at what is your current CPSD channels set to, what frequencies are they using, and also what would be a better frequency plan for your CPSD to use based on all of the information we can gather from your network, from your coex parameters if available, but also all the other operators that might be available or that might be transmitting in your area. That so we can basically create an optimal frequency channel report for you to review, and then potentially implement later on when the 150 megahertz of spectrum is available, once you have transitioned into CBRS. Well, so the next phase of the migration is the setup and preparation phase. Obviously, now you need to familiarize yourself with the SAS portal, make sure that you understand where the different fields are, make sure you understand what the different parameters mean, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a good practice to start to familiarize yourself with the SAS portal. As part of the planning process, you might have identified software updates that's required on your CPEs, of your base station sectors, et cetera, et cetera. So there might be some updates that needs to be done on the network that needs to take place before you migrate to Part 96 or CBRS. There might also be some network connectivity updates that needs to take place prior to the update. Then the next thing is you need to figure out what makes most sense for you from a migration strategy perspective. I'm just seeing 4 different approaches, and which also always depended on the preference from the WISP. Some decides to use a site by site, so pick your sites, do one by one, and associated CPEs. The other ones could be a cluster by cluster, so pick a cluster of sites and CPEs, and then migrate them. And typically that is done during the maintenance window at night, but some others just prefer to do it during the daytime. If you have multiple vendors in your network, some decide to do one vendor at a time. And then the last option we've seen is what we will call a flash cut. A flash cut, basically, you migrate the entire network in one night or in one maintenance window. The fourth aspect of the setup and preparation phase is the KPI reporting. What is a good practice is to identify the kind of parameters that you want to look at, the kind of performance indicators you want to look at, so that you can do a stare and compare from before and after the migration. The typical ones we have seen is you want to look at, obviously, is it on or off, but also what is the power levels before and after the migration, and what is your RSRQ and SINR and your RSRP. So those are four main KPIs that we've seen. But also determine how are you going to collect that information from your network and from your CPEs and your base stations, so that you can very quickly retrieve them and figure out has something changed after the migration. So the next phase is to import your CBSDs into the SAS, just the same way I demonstrated into Network Planner. You can import it, and in some cases you can also do a registration of the CBSD and just waiting to activate it. So that's possible as well, and that will be the next step as part of the preparation phase. The third phase is we call it test and communicate. It is, and that's what we've seen a lot of WISP do. Is they basically pick an area to migrate first. It could be some picks even the toy cell if it's available. Some pick a little cluster. Some pick individual sites, and just pick that area. Create a mob for how you want to implement these changes. What are the parameters that you want to change? How do you change it? But also importantly, obviously, if something goes wrong, then how can you move back to the previous condition? So create a good mob for you that you can execute, and then communicate the timelines and what it is that you're doing to all the constituents, your customer care, your network engineering team, sales and marketing, etc. And also so you can test out that communication process. And then you execute it, whether you decide to do it during the maintenance window or it's something that you can do during daytime. And then the last point is to evaluate how is that process working for you. Do any adjustment that's needed either to the mob or to how you communicate with your constituents, and then you're ready for the next phase, which is basically execute and verify the entire the rest of the network. Again, set the baseline for your network, including also a parameter audit, which is also sometimes a good practice. Get a parameter audit done before you execute, so then when you're done, you can evaluate it as part of step 3 of this process. Step 2 is obviously execute your migration, evaluate how it went from a performance perspective, and lastly, verify that everything is in order, verify the parameters are set the way they should be, so that you can declare this completed. So that's sort of a good practice that we've seen with some of the migrations that has occurred till date. I want to spend maybe a minute or two on the frequency optimization, because it's a question that we've been getting in oftentimes from on the Google SAS support page. So as I said, we look at the data that's created in the SAS portal. We utilize some of the Google geodata to say, well, this is how the propagation of all the CBSDs in your area looks like. Not just the ones that we can, not just yours that we can see, but also others, including also what other SASs is reporting to us in terms of their installation data. We can create and we can calculate the propagation from everybody that's in your area. Then also using the CBSD details to account for location, the channels, the power of all active CBSDs and incumbents in the area. And then also how, if you have the ICG and the CCG parameters configured, we can do an even further and better optimization of all the channels. We run these propagation channels in the Google Cloud, so this is obviously done relatively quickly and frequently. And then a typical, so if this is something that you are interested in, you can write up an email and request to the Google SAS support. An example of a channel report from Google will look something like this. So of all the CBSDs you have in the network, these are listed row by row, and it shows the current channels that's assigned to your CBSDs. Based on the report that we generate with everything that we can see from a SAS perspective, we can tell you, well, from a CBSD perspective, looking at the spectrum that's available, looking at the channel quality that we can get for each of these channels, for each of your CPs and base station sectors, this might be a better channel for you to use because it's cleaner, you can get more power, et cetera, et cetera. So this is a channel report that we can help generate for your network to help you utilize the entire CBRS spectrum better. And with that, I am done with my presentation and I'll hand it over to Jared.
All right, thanks. I just want to say thank you to the Baicells team and Google, both for inviting me on to share our experiences. I'm with Total High Speed, obviously, and our company's been around for 11 or 12 years. And before that, it was several companies merged together to make Total High Speed, and including TA High Speed, which was owned by our current president and CEO, Travis Allen. I've been with the company 10 years, and my title right now currently is sales engineer, although I wear many hats. I'm currently the only CPI engineer that we have, and I do RF planning, and I've been basically managing our migration for CBRS. So it's been a big project, obviously. And I'll kind of get into those numbers, and hopefully what I share today can provide some sort of insight. And I know we're going to have a question and answer session after I'm done here, and happy to provide any insight from my experiences that may be helpful to our attendees here. Our company is relatively small, maybe relatively large in terms of WISPs. We have just under 8,000 subscribers, 250 of which are fiber customers. And prior to our migration, about 380 of those were Part 90 using Ubiquiti 365, the M series 365 radios. So obviously we were forced into a situation where we were going to have to forklift the entire that entire section of our network and make that jump to CBRS. So I'm sure many other WISPs have had this experience. The COVID-19 situation set us back quite a bit, and we were happy to benefit from the extension to the October 17th deadline. But even with that, we set sales and ARPU records 3 months in a row this summer, and we were shorthanded, so we had a lot going on, and I have been extremely busy. And we started this early mid-July, maybe. Whenever we started it, we had 10 weeks to go, and we had, of course, 380 subscribers to not only switch out to new equipment, but also do the tower site as well. We had to change out all that equipment. So a lot of tower climbs and obviously a lot of truck rolls to each individual location. So that's been what I've been dealing with. It's interesting that, Martin, you bring up the strategy in terms of migration. Our strategy has been to take little clusters of our network and try to do those at once. And then the other half of the strategy has been we have a lot of competition in parts of our network. And so in the areas where we know we have competition for spectrum, we try to prioritize those areas, just so we could kind of get, we wouldn't be behind the 8 ball on, is there going to be spectrum available? And so far, we've been very lucky. We have the only competitors that we've run into have been competitors that are utilizing PALs. And I've kept all of our RF engineering in the unlicensed spectrum, the GAA access. So we were able to stay out of conflict with them. I've had to do all of the RF planning manually up to this point, so I'm very excited to see what the Coex installment has to offer and how it's going to work. But that's been my strategy so far. We're doing a lot of. I noticed in your example it was 90-degree 490 clusters. And that's what we've been deploying a lot. Mostly, we're using Baicells Nova 227s. We currently have 61 of them deployed, and we have 17 more to add. We also have 4 of the Baicells Nova 436Qs, with 2 more of those to add. And it's interesting. We saw the CBRS. The writing was obviously on the wall for several years. And it was up in the air as to when it was going to materialize, and it snuck up on us pretty quickly. But we knew that we were going to need to sort of reserve as much of the 365 spectrum as possible so that we wouldn't have too much work to do. What we ended up doing was using a lot of the Ubiquiti M365 product in relay situations, or a lot of WISPs call them micro pops, basically small cell sites that are a lot of times on a customer's home, on utility poles. They're kind of one-offs on the network. And so our per AP subscriber counts were fairly low. So when this rolled around, we had a lot of access points to switch out for not a lot of customers. But what that's allowed us to do now is it's provided a huge chunk of spectrum that's going to allow us to continue to grow the wireless part of our network in a time when we are kind of changing our focus a little bit more towards fiber. But we depend on our wireless customers to help maintain revenue, obviously, but we have to continue to be competitive. And this CBRS spectrum is obviously allowing us to do that, because we can get really good connections, surprisingly good connections, with a synchronized network, and obviously a network that is licensed channels. My experience so far with the switch outs has blown me away. I just looked at the numbers before our call. We had of the 380, 270 will be switching to Baicells. We have currently switched out, and we have switch outs going on as we speak right now. And right before the call, it was at 185. Of those switch outs that we've attempted, only 2 have failed. One was 12 miles away, and it's not that surprising that one failed. I've been a little bit aggressive with down tilt on these. And of course, the Baicells Novas have 10 degrees of electrical down tilt. So it's not a big surprise that a CPE at that distance didn't connect. The other one that failed was just buried in trees, and we had previously had a Ubiquiti M365 point-to-point link that we were just blasting through the trees, and it really wasn't a surprise that one failed either. Other than that, we've had really good success, and obviously all the other ones have succeeded. So if you would have asked me a month ago how it's going, I don't know what my answer would have been. I was really, really stressed out. But since then, I've been pleasantly surprised. And of course, the Google SAS is very intuitive. Once I got past the learning curve, it was extremely easy to use. Overall, it's been a good experience. I think that's about all I have for my little testimonial. And like I said, I'm more than happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you, Jared. Really appreciate you taking the time to jump in here and share your experience with us.
Yeah.
We're now going to open up for questions overall. We've got engineers from Baicells, we have Martin from Google, and we've got Jared. So if there's any questions that you would like to direct, whether that be on the customer side, the equipment side, the actual SaaS side of things, now is the time to ask that. I know we did already get one question in. Martin, during your presentation, you jumped out of the presentation and you looked at a Google sheet. One of the questions was asking if someone could get access to that sheet and where they could get access to that sheet. Kind of take a little deeper dive at it.
Yeah, we can share that with the audience. Yes, definitely, we can share that with the audience. It's a simple spreadsheet, but there's a couple of checks in there that will help you with collecting the information. And I think it has all the information that's needed for both the network planner and for the SAS. So it's just a good checklist to have, and to set, if that helps the audience, certainly we can share that.
Definitely. I think there'll be more than one person who will benefit from that. So we will keep an eye out for that. That is the only question that I have so far. So this is open. Feel free to post any questions in the chat, or there's also the Q&A section. You can just throw them in there, and then we can all see those questions as they come rolling through. Okay.
Max, maybe I can ask one question for Jared.
Sure.
In terms of how much extra of that 150 megahertz spectrum you utilized, and I think you mentioned that you started taking advantage of that more spectrum. How was your experience with that incremental spectrum, and how much more of it did you use?
So far, of course, with the previous spectrum that we had available, it was only 25 megahertz, I believe. And so I had certain parts of the network where I was only using 5 megahertz channels. And so now, with not only with the advent of the extra channel space available, but also the TDD framing that allows us to synchronize, we in many cases, I went from a 10 megahertz Omni to 80 megahertz worth of spectrum, only using 220 megahertz channels and doing channel reuse. That's a huge improvement in overall spectrum. So we expect that not only will we be able to provide higher capacity to perhaps business customers, but also obviously add larger numbers of subscribers per site. So we already have added a couple of business class customers to these APs, and yeah, it's been absolutely great. I have stayed, like I said, completely out of the PAL band for now, just because I didn't want to lean on it early. And of course, I was kind of monitoring the bidding as it was going on through July and August, blowing my mind with every single day how much the bids went. And we know that there were a few counties within our coverage area that bought up some PALs. So we will run into that a little bit, but I suspect that in more rural areas, we will be able to utilize some of that spectrum as well as it goes unused. So yeah, obviously, the expansion of available spectrum has been huge for us.
Great. Thanks, Jared. We do have another question that came in. Is the recommended build still in beta? I assume this is for Martin.
I'm not sure I follow the question.
Yeah, we'll have to circle back around on that one. If there's any clarity that can be provided towards that question, we can take another swing at that one. All right. Another question. Did I understand correctly that you imported your CBSD parameters into the SAS from a spreadsheet rather than having to manually enter them one at a time?
That is correct. Yeah, we can, with a comma separated file, you can import it into both the network planner and into the SAS.
Okay.
And that's a good question. Some of the early feedback we received was that the manual process of keying in the parameters was very laborious, and it was very error prone. So that's why we recommended using this approach. That does help speed up the process, and it does help catch some of those errors. Also the fact of catching them before you import it into SAS by using the network planner functionality.
And I can second that too. I had to manually enter everything into my SAS, and it laborious is a good word for it.
Yeah, understatement maybe.
Okay. Kind of a follow-up on that one is when SAS is utilized and the reports are generated to allow for channel audits, you said that the data is frequently updated. I assume the data for suggested channels are based on other information inputted from companies or something Google scans for directly.
Oh, you're talking about the channel reports, I suppose. Yeah, so that is still being worked on. And what you can do, so it's still being worked on. We have channel reports that we're sending out to customers at the moment for review. And also what you can do is we do have a newsletter, and we do also have some sessions on our Tuesday onboarding sessions where we go through some of these. So you can definitely get a report on it right now. It's still being worked, to be honest, and we're still getting some of those input into the SAS in terms of CCG and ICG parameters. So there will always be optimization of these reports going on, but I encourage you to get a copy of it. Just send an email to the SAS support, and we can generate a report for you, and then we can take a look at it.
All right. And I think that answers the question, which is where do we find the proper syntax or template for that file? I believe you just answered that. Okay, so to turn back around to the question that we wanted to follow up on, so that question was actually directed towards Baicells. So Rick or Ronald, if you guys could help me with this one. So this is regarding the beta question for Gen 2 CPEs. The latest beta firmware is 2.4.2 when asking for what the working build is for CBRS. One of you guys help me answer that question?
Is it Cat 4 or Cat 6? You don't know. 2.4.2.
I am not sure. Cat 4.
Yeah, I'm expecting, and I have been expecting it to go out of beta by the end of this month. So next week. There's a OMC upgrade, and all the firmware for the CPE should be finished here by the end of the month.
Perfect. Thanks.
Okay.
Also related to Baicells, a question for that. Does Baicells have an easy method to collect some of the needed data? And I assume that needed data is for the SAS platform.
Yeah, I believe in the OMC you can download or export reports. There's also should be a KPI section that you can customize your own KPI criteria and reports, and then export those. I would ask support for help if you need that, and possibly we can go ahead and put it together another webinar on that, Max.
Okay, we'll keep that in mind. And to reach out to support, the email there is support_na@baicells.com if you need help getting that information. Okay, looks like we're all caught up on questions. Oh, here we go. I wasn't able to make the webinar until now. Can I get a link to the recording? Yes, we are recording this. We will make this posting public also on our YouTube channel, so you can reference it later. When can we get a link for the spreadsheet that was displayed? Martin, you said you will be able to send out a link. Is that correct?
Yeah, we'll figure out how to get that to you as soon as possible.
Okay. We'll try to get that out to you guys as soon as we're done here. All right. All caught up on questions. If there's any final questions, now's the time to ask them. Otherwise, we'll give everybody about 14 minutes back in their day.
Thank you, gentlemen.
All right. Thank you, everybody. If you do have any further questions, you can always reach out to the Baicells support team. Like I said, they're happy to answer any questions, and they can be contacted at support_NA@baicells.com. We will be posting this recording publicly, and we will be trying to get everybody that Google spreadsheet as well. Perfect. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining here today. If you have any other follow-up questions, feel free to reach out. Otherwise, I hope the rest of you have a good rest of your week.